Modern.
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 We're prepping for a voyage.
Modern.
The force of an old-fashioned equals whiskey mass times bitters acceleration.
Why don't you make that a double?
Modern bar cart.
What's shakin', cocktail fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Modern Bar Cart podcast. As always, I'm your host, Eric Kozlik, and I come to you today with a long-awaited episode. If you remember, back when we launched the Embitterment Heritage Collection a few months ago, I dedicated an episode to exploring the cocktail history and culture pertaining to each of our new flavors, except Tiki. And today, we're going to fix that. But first, a couple quick announcements. First announcement is that we're giving you, the podcast listeners, a ridiculous discount because, well, we feel like it. All this week, literally until we launch the next episode after this one, our Typhoon Tiki Bitters by Embitterment will be 50% off. That's 50, not 15, 50% off. All you have to do is use the code FREAKYTIKI, all one word, at checkout on modernbarcart.com, and you'll get that product half off. Announcement number 2 is for all our Maryland and DC area listeners. This coming weekend, April 21st, 2018, we'll be hanging out with all our favorite Maryland distillers at the Frederick Craft Spirits Festival at the fairgrounds in Frederick, Maryland. We'll be manning the mixers booth alongside the Shrub District crew. So come on down to that event, sample all our products, and check out the amazing work that our Maryland distillers are doing as well. I've got a link to that event in the show notes, and if you follow that link, you can pick up your tickets, which are $40. But that's actually a great deal because there's going to be over a dozen local distilleries all in one spot. Plus, we're going to be there, so you know it's going to be a good time. Before we jump into our Tiki interview with Ben Wiley of Archipelago, I think it's only fitting that you should make yourself a Tiki drink. This week's featured cocktail is the legendary Mai Tai. If there was a Mount Rushmore of Tiki drinks, the Mai Tai would definitely be up there. It's complex, sweet, sour, fruity, and it packs a punch. To make this one, you'll need 1 ounce of amber rum, 1 ounce of Jamaican rum, 1 ounce fresh lime juice, ½ ounce of orange curacao, 1/4 ounce of orgeat, which is an almond syrup, and 1/4 ounce of regular simple syrup. To make it, you combine all those ingredients in a shaker with crushed, not cubed ice. You shake it for 10 seconds and then pour the entire concoction into a Collins glass or a large rocks glass with a mint garnish. Now, Ben and I spend a good amount of time on the Mai Tai this episode, and if there's one thing to remember, it's that this recipe is just a set of guidelines. Go into 10 Tiki bars, you're going to come out with 10 completely different takes on the Mai Tai. But this recipe, which I took from imbibe.com, is a great place to start your experiments. Also, later in the episode, we give a couple of options for how to achieve crushed ice in a home setting. So if that step of the process happens to be tricky for you, just listen in. We've got some tips later on. Besides the Mai Tai, some of the things Ben and I discuss in this episode include how to define Tiki, which isn't as easy as it sounds, a brief history of Tiki, including the stories of Don the Beachcomber and Trader Vic, common Tiki ingredients and spirits to have on hand at your home bar, a handful of excellent cocktail recipes to start sampling at your favorite Tiki bar and experimenting with at home, a new lightning round question, and much, much more. The story of how Ben rose through the ranks of the hospitality industry here in DC to carve out his own niche as one of the owner-operators of Archipelago Tiki Bar is a really inspiring story for anybody who cares about flavor and good hospitality. So if you're in the DC area, I do hope you'll head on over to U Street and grab a drink and chat with Ben. But for now, I think you should throw on a Hawaiian shirt, set your Amazon Echo to play beach noises, maybe drink something out of a coconut, and enjoy this fascinating conversation with Ben Wiley of Archipelago. Ben, thanks for being on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
So today we are finally digging into a kind of long-awaited topic here on the Modern Bar Cart podcast, and that is the world of Tiki. So why don't we start out with just telling people who you are, what you do, and maybe how this location where we're sitting came into being.
Okay, well, my name is Ben Wiley. I'm owner-operator of Archipelago here. It's on 12th and U. So I have been a bartender and in the hospitality industry for about 10 years now. Came in here after college, did the thing where I think a lot of people do, where they think they're going to go into politics, and you take a step back and you go, no. So I kind of fell into the hospitality industry, loved it, loved the people, loved the hours, loved the hard work, loved the kind of taking of ownership and enjoying myself at working with people. And so I have met a few good people along the way and met a lot of great people, but working with them, me and my business partners, we decided to do Tiki. It was a little bit of a long journey. We'd been bartenders at different establishments together. And then this place kind of popped up in DC, and then it was the right time, right place, a lot of great little things, kind of a confluence of events. And we can talk about Tiki and what that means to us and where we think it is in the world and where it's kind of coming from and hopefully where it's going. That's
nice.
Kind of what I want to talk about today.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we've been back about this past January. We launched a new set of bitters, and what I tried to do for those was kind of assign a podcast episode to each flavor and kind of explain what the deal was with that flavor. And one of our flavors was Tiki. Mm-hmm. And what I realized when we got to that episode, I kind of dragged my feet, put it off to the last one, and I just realized by the time I got to it that I didn't know nearly enough to be able to do it justice. Mm-hmm. So hoping that that's what we can do here today. Apologies to anybody listening. We're right above an active construction zone. We're trying to minimize that, but you may hear a few noises. It just means we're here live at Archipelago in the real world.
It's U Street. It's the summer.
It is U Street. It's the first day that it actually feels like a little bit, spring-like. So now is when we're kind of revisiting the topic of Tiki, and I'm hoping that you can just give us a basic working definition of what Tiki is.
So that's easier said than done. I'll try to keep it brief. Tiki, and I could go into history, a little bit of it. Historically speaking, it kind of came out of a lot of different elements, but to me, Tiki at its essence is a vibe. I think people use it as a gateway for a lot of different things. I think you find a lot of people love it for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's the music, sometimes it's the decorations, it's the aesthetics, it's the history. It might be a little bit of the culture, and for us, it's been drinks and kind of marrying all those elements. And in our good days, it's about a vibe. I believe that Tiki has a lot to offer people, other than just like these sugary cocktails that people might like assume, like, from their parents or maybe on the beach. But there's a lot to dig into there, and it's been a kind of a fun thing for us to kind of discover ourselves as we kind of have gone down the rabbit hole.
So if Tiki is a vibe, how would you describe that vibe?
Again, on our best days, it's taking yourself into kind of a vacation. This world, kind of a lot goes on every day. I think at its best moments, it is the ones that kind of take you outside of the day-to-day, the construction sites, the people on the cars, and you're taking a step back, and you're a tropical island. You are all of a sudden, you're whisked away. You get to paint a picture of yourself drinking a drink with maybe an umbrella, a long straw, and you're mentally on vacation. And that's what we hope to do. And that's hopefully, kind of, and it's hard to distill down into a couple different things, but I'd like to think that, when people are happy, it creates its own just mindset. So
Sure. What you're kind of describing reminds me of something that I read in a really famous Robert Frost essay called The Shape a Poem Makes. And he says there's something about it, a sense of transport. Mm-hmm. When you read a great piece of literature or poetry, you're transported somewhere somehow. And it seems like you're describing that kind of transport here, where you're literally stepping off the street here in U Street and entering a space. And part of that transport is kind of the vibe that you're describing as Tiki here.
Exactly. What we hope to do and what Tiki is to a lot of different people, it pulls from a lot of different aspects of the world. It pulls from different islands, different cultures, sometimes, too much. But on a whole, it is, the drinks, the music, the decor, the tropical plants. You're kind of sitting there and you're like, this is where I want to be. I'm transported away, and I get to kind of like relive like a good moment or, create new ones.
Yeah, and there's definitely, I'd say, a little bit of kitschiness, a little bit of sort of like cheesy Hawaiian shirt thing going on, where it's almost like you would not be maybe caught dead if you are a, young professional business person. You would not be caught dead wearing a Hawaiian shirt, even on casual Friday at the office, but maybe the Tiki bar is a place where you get to kind of let that freak flag fly a little bit.
I think that what attracts it to a lot of people of all different ages. I mean, you can go back. We have people that bring their parents. We have older patrons that love this place and remember it when they were kids. So, and then we have fresh out of college people come here because it is unlike any other bar, and that's what a lot of Tiki bars, and I think that's why there's a certain resurgence across lots of major cities and places like Omaha. You'll find Tiki bars pop up, and you're like, oh man, I love this. I dig it. People travel. They make little check marks of different cities they go to. They go, where's the Tiki bar? And hopefully, we like to be that one in DC that they can kind of as a bellwether and send people other ways. It's like kind of a common element throughout a lot of different cities now,
Right.
So it's kind of a cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah, it's a neat little niche community for sure. And I think whenever you can find a community that gathers around flavor, among other things, there's other aspects of Tiki as well, but flavor is a huge part of it. So it's definitely cool that you are, dedicating your spot here in DC to be an epicenter for that flavor community. Since DC is a place that we get a lot of people visiting, it's really great that you're here providing that space. Can we talk about the history of Tiki and maybe use that as a way to kind of flesh out the definition? Because I think we've got some work to do. Tiki is a big thing, but I think starting with the history and hitting some of the details, we might be able to build more of a picture in people's minds to give them a better idea of Tiki.
Well, it helps to understand where it comes from. The inception of it is kind of, it's two main gentlemen. So you started out in the 1930s in LA. You have a gentleman by the name, he goes by Don the Beachcomber. He created this little tropical bar in LA. He is, putting little plants. He's pretty good with making drinks, and he kind of creates this island oasis in this hotel bar. A lot of LA people are starting to come in, visit it. And Ernest Scans, this guy who later became known as Trader Vic's, sees this idea, tries to buy into it with actually Don the Beachcomber, and then kind of goes, well, you don't want to be a part of me. I'm gonna start my own. So he starts Trader Vic's, and that is where it kind of takes it to the next level. He's really good at creating atmosphere, and which is notoriously hard to do. And he is making drinks, being a showman. He is a consummate showman. White tablecloths. He is kind of doing this element of tropical plants. There's music. There's water. So this is happening in the 30s and 40s, and it kind of is slowly taking off. When it becomes fairly and very popular is in the 40s and 50s, when you have a lot of World War II veterans coming back from the islands in the South Seas. They come back and they see they might not be able to go and take their wives or take their families there, but they remember these tropical destinations. And now there's a restaurant that's catering to this and kind of this mystical. It's like I said, a confluence of different ideas. So you're taking Caribbean rum, you're taking maybe some food from China. He's taking like South Seas Polynesian vibes. He's taking these ideas of Tiki in its element is these little like gods, island gods from Polynesia and different islands. So you have these kind of spots pop up all over the country. So in Cleveland, there's a big restaurants. There's Mai Tai down in Florida. There's these restaurants that come out in the 40s and 50s, and they are becoming these big destinations. A lot of people go there for their one night out. They bring their families. And so you have a lot of this, the decor is, to try to understand. It's a lot of these bamboo is a big element, wooden ships. Sometimes you have like different pufferfish, you have different glass lights, you have all these elements that people don't really see. So it gives you a nice little kind of like you're stepping back into a different era. And it becomes very popular in the 50s and 60s. And so at that stage, you're kind of getting, these people making these highly difficult drinks, and it's this air of mystery. So what you have is with these cocktails, a lot of people have an understanding, I think, that we can talk about the tiki drinks in a little bit. But what I think is this, it went hand in hand. You're getting these great, wonderful, like complex cocktails that are coming out of like a mystery bar that just comes delivered to your table with these orchids and umbrellas and pineapple leaves and flowers and fruit, and you're taking these sips of passion fruit, orgeat, all these new ingredients that no one really knows, and maybe doesn't understand, but they just know that they love it and it's delicious, and so they're dangerously imbibing, and it becomes a great night out for a lot of different people at that time.
Yeah, for sure. And you kind of mentioned briefly the decor that's associated with it. And we're sitting up on your mezzanine right now. And I'm just going to take a little tour of the room here visually, try and keep my mouth on the mic. But you've got a bunch of tiki-looking masks hanging on the walls. You've got some paintings of tiki masks. You have some framed island-themed albums. We've got one about Hawaii. There's an Elvis, I believe, the Blue Hawaii album. We've got some sconces, some candle sconces that have a very Polynesian vibe to them, and a lot of wood carvings. One of them looks like a stingray or a manta ray over there. We've got fishing nets hanging from the ceiling, and then we have these like bamboo hanging chairs that are also almost like chandelier type art, and it's all accented by kind of tropical looking plants and flowers. And so I think in terms of like the tiki vibe, you've definitely got like a good sense of atmosphere even in a kind of mezzanine here in DC.
Yeah, that's our goal, exactly. You see a lot of these elements kind of pop up in different nights, but for different bars, they will have maybe a tiki drink night. We've been able to recreate and slowly add to it as we can kind of acquire new things, and there's different kind of tiki idols, these tall tiki, as we talk to wood carvers, you get this weird connection with people, and we've talked to people that blow glass, and so there's this weird like sub community of people that really make it kind of a fun thing, and a lot of it's also DIY. So I think that attracts a lot of the home bartenders, is that the aesthetics is, okay, well, I can buy this thatch and I'll roll it out and make it my own little personal little bar cart. And I'll slowly add to it, and maybe I'll find another thing in a garage sale. I'll pick up a glass and it has a little like mug on it and be able to bring it home.
Yeah, my wife is actually from a beach community in South Jersey, and she grew up there. She was one of the locals, so even after the crowds went home for the winter, she stayed there. But I get the chance to visit there a lot, and there's this one dock, and it's kind of like a southwest facing dock, so they're right on a point. They've got this great view of the sunset, and they've got this awesome tiki bar that's kind of got like this thatch, and it's the thing that I love about it the most is that they've got 4 Adirondack chairs literally drilled into the dock facing the sunset next to this thatched tiki bar, and you can tell that they're just like, we want a tiki bar and we want it right in our favorite spot to view the sunset. And it's kind of like them creating their own little vibe right there on the water. And
that's exactly, sometimes, we hope to create, people will say, oh, I had this great drink in Hawaii, I was on the beach, and I can guarantee you that while we probably we can recreate the drink, we're really, hoping to recreate that vibe too. Make sure that people are like, man, I just want to go back there for a little moment in time. And
yeah. So one of the things I want to zoom in on a little bit and see if we can talk a little bit more about is, you mentioned an air of mystery around the tiki drinks, and this is because tiki drinks are very complicated. And like you mentioned, especially in the 40s, 50s, people don't know what an orgeat is. Most people don't know what an orgeat or a falernum is today. So maybe could you talk about some of the types of ingredients, whether those are the syrups or the juices that are commonly used, and just kind of go through some of those so that people can start making some flavor connections?
Sure. Real briefly, their mystery kind of comes, again, with the showmanship that Trader Vic and Down the Beachcomber like to exude. They would have these mystery bottles. The bartenders a lot of the times didn't know what was exactly in them. They would make them in secret batches. They would have, mixes of different rums, lots of different layers. So that's how they built a lot of these classic drinks, is using these ingredients that they would create and put them in bottles. And it was the first kind of proto batching, when you're saying you take 2 or 3 different bottles of liquor, putting them in one, and then maybe making fresh juices in another, and having a batch of secret syrup. So you have a lot of mixes that call for Dawn spices. Now, Dawn spices would be maybe, a mix of falernum, which is basically a spice cordial. So you see it kind of come in. We make our own. It's a little bit labor intensive, I won't lie. So it comes in with lime peels and ginger and allspice and high proof rum to kind of carry it, and sugar. You use these in very finite amounts. So usually maybe a 1/4 ounce, a bar spoon here. You have things like orgeat, which is an almond syrup. That's what it started out as, and now people are using nut syrups in lots of different ways. It's kind of cool. But passion fruit's another, these little tropical flavors. They were able to dial in and create these like kind of exotic drinks based on profiles that maybe people had not had before. So when we kind of looked at it and were able to hopefully take those ideas and kind of push them a little bit forward, or hopefully recreate them, and then understand what those flavor profiles were and move forward. So something like allspice dram, which is not something I think everybody has in their home bar kit, is basically a pimento dram. So it's something you use in very almost like bitters. Really, you use a bar spoon, and it creates this kind of like almost Christmassy notes, and has these allspice elements to it. So gives it, you might not know what you're tasting. You just all of a sudden at the end of the drink, you're like, is that nutmeg? So it's kind of a cool flavor profile to work within.
Right. Yeah, allspice dram and falernum and orgeat are all things that you can definitely do at home. I'd say probably one of the better resources to look into if you're interested in trying to do some DIY tiki stuff is probably Liquid Intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's where I got my orgeat recipe, and it actually turned out pretty well the first time. So usually that's not how it goes when you DIY some of the more complicated ingredients.
I think that's part of the fun of it, is trying to figure out this taste, and hopefully you can find a good bar in your area that kind of can let you taste a couple other things. I've always recommend people go and ask a bartender during a slow moment, like, hey, how do you make some of these ingredients, or can I taste just on your own? So when you're doing something like orgeat or falernum, there are a couple commercial products available, and I'm not a shill for any of them, but I do enjoy, like Giffard makes a good orgeat, and there's a couple things that have become available on the market that will add to your arsenal at your home bar, that you don't have to make an orgeat that might only last for 3 weeks or so.
Sure. Yeah, it's always tricky when you go for the larger produced ingredients like that. I would definitely go online before you pull the trigger and read some reviews, because people will be really honest about how their drinks turned out if they shelled out for it. Yeah, I prefer the fresh approach. One of the things I like about tiki is the freshness of it. It is labor intensive in that literally you're juicing all that citrus, a lot of lime juicing, and pineapple juice. Any of those fresh fruit juices are just going to be fairly labor intensive, but I think that's part of the pleasure out of it for me. In terms of making the drinks at home, you're definitely going to get a lot of reward out of taking that time and seeing your skills improve.
Exactly. Those are critical. You mentioned fresh juices. Again, people have a somewhat negative association sometimes with tiki drinks. As far as it goes, they'll say, it's kind of a stab to my heart a little bit when someone comes in. It's like, I don't want anything sweet. I'm like, oh no, these are complex, and with fresh juices, you're looking for that balance, and they give it to you that as acid base. And so when you make them at home, you can kind of fine tune within your needs. And so a lot of tiki drinks are a lot about texture as well. So you can dial in a lot of things with maybe some use of, you mentioned Liquid Intelligence. Dave Arnold's great about telling you, add a little bit of this little chemical, and you can keep it at home. There's shelf stable, xanthan gum, something that kind of gives us this rich mouthfeel, and that's a critical part of tiki drinks.
Right. Yeah, so definitely check out that resources. We'll link to it in the show notes. It's a big book, it's a thick book, but it's a book that's going to really serve you well, so it's definitely worth paying out for. So other stuff about tiki. We've hit so far some of the base ingredients, some of the history. What are some of the most popular tiki drinks that people are going to come across if they go to pretty much any tiki bar?
So It's funny, there's a lexicon of classic cocktails. I think that some of them have made that jump over. People are definitely familiar with Mai Tais. I think, for better or worse, they have had the arsenal of Mai Tais, from great to cloyingly sweet. You have zombies, fog cutters. So some of those are going to be like the classic style tiki drinks and can be made a variety of different ways. And I think that's what when you look at these classic drinks, they might have 8, 9, 10 ingredients. And a lot of it for us was trying to dial in those. And for the home bartender as well, it's trying to figure out like, okay, so a recipe calls for a gold rum. What is a gold rum? What is a dark rum? What is a white rum? All those are very important questions, and will make or break your drink, or it can make your drink 15 different ways. So ingredients, especially when it comes to the liquor choice and all those, is a fun part of experimenting.
It's certainly a practice in complexity, and the simplicity-complexity debate in cocktails is something that I'm personally really interested in, because, on the one end of the spectrum, you have the martini and the old-fashioned and the Manhattan that are just these beautiful pieces of elegantly simple mixing of a few little ingredients. And then on the other hand, you have tiki cocktails, and like you said, 8, 9 ingredients. That's almost hopelessly complex if you are looking for consistency across bars. Now, it seems like what you were saying is that when you looked into starting this bar, you were like, all right, we kind of need to figure out our Mai Tai as opposed to maybe the classic Trader Vic's Mai Tai, or the Mai Tai that I had, last month when I visited Latitude 20 down in New Orleans.
It was definitely a very large discussion we had when we came in and wanted to kind of tackle. It's a daunting task, I feel like, for a lot of people. But what we had fun was looking into a Mai Tai. So you take the classic ingredients. When you look at it from one standpoint, it's just a margarita. It has orange curacao, it has lime juice, and it has a liquor, and then a dash of orgeat that kind of takes it to this next level. Where it becomes a fun project is, okay, so Trader Vic's might call for a rum agricole and a dark rum. He would use a Jamaican rum. So okay, well that's the framework you're working with then. Okay, let's take it, and what do we like to taste? What do we, what are we going for? So with us, it was tackling like, okay, what rums create these little complex notes, and that's what was interesting for us is you can make a Mai Tai 100 different ways based on which rums you choose. So you want a lighter, kind of maybe fruitier cocktail. You might amp up the orange curacao and make it a little bit sweeter with orgeat. Or you might want to get, in our case, we love dark Jamaican rum. So we did this heavy, ester-based, weird, funky Hogo rum. And, it's definitely sets us a little bit apart. For some people, I think they're like, wow, there's a lot of booze in here, and that's how we like it. But that's, kind of gives us a framework to know what your palate is.
Sure, exactly. You mentioned a term that I really like, and I don't think we have come across it yet on the podcast. Hogo. Can you explain what Hogo means?
So Hogo is an older term. It refers to basically the funkiness of rum. So you're looking at it from, I think people, I know you've talked a little bit about rum in your podcast before, but rum can go a lot of different ways because it is such a broad spirit. So you can end up with a very light column distilled Puerto Rican rum that's great for sipping, or you can end up on the opposite end of the spectrum almost. It's this Jamaican, weird, funky, what you would get out of a pot still that kind of creates this. You're like, what am I, are these bananas in there? There's this weird, the nose is off. It's not I don't think it's one that people are come across when they first started drinking rum. So for us, it was this is what we like. We want those funky, weird ingredients, and that's what we kind of responded to.
Yeah, and Hogo, it actually stands for, and you can, I'm going to say my understanding of it. If I'm wrong here, definitely correct me, but I believe that Hogo stands for haute goûter, which is a French term for elevated or high taste, or great tasting.
Yeah, that would sound like something David Wondrich would be better served to talk about the history. But he refers to it when he talks about rum, and it does have that weird, just you don't know the word, but you know what it refers to kind of moment.
Right. And I believe that the actual history of that taste is that funkiness is also what they associate with dead game. So you'd shoot a pheasant or something, and then you would hang that pheasant, you'd let it age basically. and kind of start to decompose, to be honest. And at least back in the time when people started making rum, this was a really, really popular thing to do. And to kind of have that decay, like they just couldn't get enough of that. It was the best tasting thing in the world was this hung dead pheasant for a couple days. And I think that's where Hogo and Haute Goûter actually is derived from. And
as a person that likes to try new things and likes the weirder spectrum of spirits and food, that's why we respond to that term and use it, like to this day, I think, is because it does have a moment of fun associated with it.
Yeah, for sure. So folks, put Hogo in your rum lexicon and maybe drop that one next time you want to get a puzzled look from someone. So let's talk about a couple more tiki cocktails that are pretty popular and maybe drop a couple recipes.
Okay.
I'm really interested in the Jungle Bird because it has Campari, I believe.
So that's one of those outliers. You say rum, as far as we've talked about, it has a certain spectrum. Tiki drinks, you have your passion fruit, orgeat, and falernum. Jungle Bird kind of comes out of nowhere in the 70s. It becomes a very popular drink, and it's popular to this day because Campari is a fun drink to work with. Most people associate it with a Negroni. I think that's the introductory, and you kind of, it's bitter. It's kind of this like weird Italian digestif, and you enjoy it. They were using it in the Jungle Bird as kind of this spice notes, with these notes to bring out a little bit of bitterness and balance to the pineapple juice they're throwing in there. So it's usually calls for like a dark Jamaican rum, and you have a little sugar to kind of balance it out. But the Campari gives it this awesome nuance and notes, and you might not generally associate bitters, and you don't see them a lot of times. I don't mean bitters. I mean like bitter digestifs and aperitifs. You don't see them called for in classic tiki drinks because they weren't available at the time. But that doesn't mean that you can't use them. It just means it brings different notes to drinks, and that's why it's fun to try. And the Jungle Bird has been a fun modern drink to kind of bring in new elements to.
So it's dark rum, pineapple juice, Campari, anything else?
Yeah, a dash of sugar.
Okay.
And you can. That's a framework. Again, a lot of these. The great thing about cocktail culture is that sometimes these drinks are written down. Jungle Bird actually was, but like a Mai Tai, there's 14 different versions of a Mai Tai in Beach Bum Berry's book, and they all call for maybe they call for orange juice or maybe they call for pineapple juice sometimes, and the definition is not written in stone sometimes. You can kind of play around with that, and so it creates a little bit more of a playground to work within, which we like.
Yeah. Can we do Zombie and Painkiller? I feel like those are like two more real popular ones.
So Zombie's, again, one of those drinks that you see 14 different versions. The 1937 version, this was sold in 1944 at a different bar. So with Zombies, you have three different types of rums generally. 151, which is an overproof rum, which is going to give you the backbone. And then you have two different other rums, usually a Puerto Rican and maybe a Jamaican rum. And then you have lime juice, grapefruit juice, usually cinnamon syrup. And you have Angostura bitters and sometimes Pernod. And then from there, we have our own version. So sometimes a little bit more curacao, and sometimes a little bit of sugar. So, that's the tiki framework. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, that kind of comes out the Zombie comes in 1937 roughly, and then on the other end of the spectrum is the Painkiller. So the Painkiller comes out of the Soggy Bottom bar in the 1970s. This is a bar down in Florida, in the Bahamas region, and becomes associated with. It's kind of like right where the pina colada is. It's kind of like that next step. So it would have pineapple juice and orange juice, coconut, and dark rum. So, and it's garnished with a little bit of nutmeg. Now, get into the legal definition. I think Painkiller is trademarked at this point. But for those are what makes it great. It's kind of a little bit sweet, but it has that Jamaican rum, which gives it a backbone, and it becomes a very popular drink to sip on. And that Coco Lopez, which we prefer, but cream of coconut is the ingredient that kind of makes everybody think of that beach weather.
Right. Yeah, I really like what you're saying when you describe some of these drinks, and you're almost using like an anatomical definition. You're saying the 151 in the Zombie gives it the backbone, the Jamaican rum gives it the backbone, and it seems like with tiki, you're almost starting from that kind of core, like what's going to make this drink stand up and actually be a boozy drink,
right?
And what are the things that are then going to spread out from there to kind of balance it out? All right, if we've got something sweet kind of spreading out from this side, how are we going to get something acidic in there as well that's going to balance that out and not make it too cloying? So is that kind of a way to think about balancing a tiki drink?
I think that's one of the important elements that for us is, okay, so certain rums, you don't want to go too heavy into one, it'll overpower the drink. You're looking for, and that's a large part why a lot of these call for two, it's a very interesting to split a base. So when you make a Manhattan, you have usually 2 ounces of a spirit, but in a rum drink, you're calling maybe 3/4 of an ounce. And why are you doing that? And so that took us a while to understand why you would have a Jamaican rum next to a Puerto Rican rum, next to a Guyana rum, next to a, Martinique rum. All those give these notes that are almost hard to understand from a palate level. It took us a while exactly to understand how they work together. So it's been a long time to kind of get comfortable, but it's been a cool thing to do. So it's with drinks at home, that's what buying a couple rums and trying stuff out is kind of the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a great interview with Chad Robinson, who's the brand rep for Catoctin Creek, and one of the things that we talked about was infinity bottles, and he has a rum infinity bottle, and he was talking about how that's very similar to what a master blender does at a distillery, particularly like a brandy or a cognac house. And so it seems like what you're doing here in a tiki bar, in order to zoom in on that particular blend that's going to make your Mai Tai just that much more special, is you're actually doing a little bit of that blending yourself. But once it's locked in, like the goal is eventually to lock that in and have that be like your secret bottle, like the bottle with the 3 X's on it that you're not going to tell people exactly what's in it.
Right. One of our more popular drinks is called the Pineapple Hospitality, and it's all listed as rum and secrets. And you get a lot of questions like, what are secrets? And you go, well, I think that's exactly what they are. They're secret. And so you get a lot of like these back and forths, and you're kind of like, well, just enjoy yourself. Like let somebody, in this day of everybody knowing everything and transparency, it's kind of fun to have one thing just be unknowable. And so it's been fun for us again to figure out those different weird rums and wonder how they work together.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I'm discovering as we talk is that there's definitely an aspect of tiki where it's just like, shut up and enjoy your drink.
Honestly, I end up saying that sometimes in my head a lot, because people look at the drinks, the garnishes, and it's a cliche, but you drink with your eyes first, right? A lot of people say that, and with tiki, it's one of the most forward elements. It's like, oh, I've got this big huge glass, I've got this like frothy mug, and I've got umbrella on top, a twisty straw, and a mint spray jutting out me, and an orchid. And you know what? Like, maybe just enjoy the drink. Don't worry about what goes in it. I mean, we're happy to tell you, of course, but for the most part, like, just enjoy yourself. Like, let it happen.
Yeah. So I think maybe a good piece of advice for somebody who's never gone to a tiki bar, if you want to go to one, definitely like pay attention and enjoy the details. Mm-hmm. But I think maybe the thing that should be taking the front seat is just chilling out and enjoying the vibe.
I think that, and again, I spoke to that in the beginning, and the drinks are something we focus on and we're proud of, but at the same point, like, I want you to have a good time. I want you to not, I want you to enjoy yourself and lay back and kind of take your mind off everything, especially in DC, as again, this city is constantly going and hustling and bustling, and you're just kind of like, look, just one moment, let loose.
Yeah.
And drink a drink.
Nice. So before we jump into the lightning round here, I do want to just ask if you have any advice for people who want to, in a home bar setting, achieve some of the beauty and the garnish complexity that comes with a lot of tiki drinks. Because at a bar, the nice thing is you can do everything at scale. You can prep all your garnishes ahead of time. At home, how can somebody maybe pay attention while they're shopping or use some of the things lying around their pantry to make a really cool tiki garnish without having to, purchase a bunch of stuff?
So garnishes are a fun element of tiki and the kitsch and the kind of pageantry of it. We are constantly looking into the different ways to kind of create a drink. But if you're at home, fresh fruit can be cut a lot of different ways. We've done zesting. You've done, you have a nice little tool to have is actually a little channel knife. So a channel knife will give you kind of like these different ways to cut little designs into maybe an orange or a lime, and you can look online to see kind of examples of how we do it. We do it with bananas. We made little banana animals, and take some cloves, you put them for eyes, and you'll be surprised how much reaction you get out of a guest or a bar at home if you're handing a person a drink with a little banana. We do an octopus. We cut little legs into the half of a banana, and all of a sudden you've got a little banana sitting on your drink. So lime wheels, lemon wedges. Have a couple of toothpicks lying around. They can go a long way. Fresh mint sprigs. Those garnishes. A paper umbrella. They're very cheap. They're fun to have around. They can hide in a bar cart. You can buy pretty decent brandy cherries these days, and having a couple of those around. And don't be afraid of it. Don't there was this move to minimalism and this aesthetically let's just focus on the drink. Tiki is the opposite of that. Tiki is a lot of let's overindulge. Let's just throw everything on there. And again, with Tiki, if you have a couple mugs at home, you're garnishing the top of the glass, so you want to have a straw. There's a couple of good metal ones around these days. Poke that right into the ice. So again, I hadn't talked about the ice. That's a kind of an interesting thing to bring into mind. A lot of people, you can buy a small little ice crusher, as opposed to most drinks that are shaken or stirred that want larger cubes or maybe like bigger chunks so you're not diluting as much. Tiki drinks are going to have this different viscosity to them when you're using orgeat or you're using like a rich simple syrup. So you want the drink to last longer. That's the other thing that something like a zombie or Mai Tai, these aren't meant to be gulped down. They are like slow sippers. So we use crushed ice here. You can use these little, it's called pebble ice. There's a couple little, buy yourself a cheap Waring, it's $30. You can put little chipped ice in there, hand crank them out. It gets this nice pebble ice, and you use those as instead of shaking it, you're using we use milkshake tins. So the milkshake tins and like 4 ounces of crushed ice, and whip it around a little milkshake spinner. You can buy those. Tiki is not just like it's a mindset, but it is like you have to have a couple little things to make it work for you at home, but you're going to break the bank. But if you have a couple of these, it goes a long way to making a perfect Mai Tai for you.
Yeah.
And so the crushed ice, again, and then you're filling it to the top of the brim, put that drink in there, and then garnish that top of the glass, and just have fun with it, man. Don't overthink it too much. Just, try to make sure that you enjoy it. And turns out those drinks are really Instagram friendly, man.
They really are. I was at one in Virginia the other week, and they gave me a drink that was served up in a glass that was basically looked like a fish with its mouth open, and they had just mint coming out of the fish's mouth. It looked like it was barfing up mint or something, but it was so cool.
And again, I know exactly what glass you're talking about, and I would love to serve you a drink in that. Those are the ones, use your imagination. There's no right or wrong way. It's just, again, whatever makes you happy. And that's why I think a lot of people respond to Tiki at the end of the day.
Right. Those are great points about garnishes and ice. So just to summarize, we're going to put links to some of those metal straws, maybe some cocktail picks, some umbrellas, and an ice crusher to create that pebble ice. We'll put links to all of those in the show notes. Not to say that we have necessarily an opinion on the best brands, but we'll put some links so that you can go to our show notes page, modernbarcart.com/podcast. Check out what those pieces of equipment look like so that you can go do your own research and figure out where to buy them. Hopefully, as we break into the hardware a little bit more, we'll be able to put together a little Tiki kit for folks at home that's kind of curated by us. But in the meantime, we'll definitely get you those links so you can do some self-shopping. Ready for some lightning round?
I think so.
Awesome. So, what is your favorite cocktail? And if you don't have a favorite of all time, is there a cocktail that you've been more recently obsessed with?
I feel like I'm cheating a little bit here because I've talked about it so much already, but I don't have a favorite cocktail. I drink, love, everything about old fashions and Negronis, and could go wax on and on about them. But when you're in a tiki bar and you have all these tools at your disposal, a proper Mai Tai goes a long way. And I'm constantly finding different ways to make it my own and to change it and maybe someday make it and it's a fun drink to experiment with. So that would probably be my favorite right now, and the one I'm always going to have in the back of my head. How do I make it better?
For sure. Yeah, and it seems because there's so many access points for complexity it's never going to bore you.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can go, and that's the only kind of small downfall of it is that not every bar will have ogiat. I don't think every bar should have ogiat behind the bar, but if you find one and you see it on the menu, it's a fun one to placeholder to a kind of or to reference point for other bars. It's like, oh, they make it this way. Why do they make it that way? What or how do I make it at home? And what is different about this? And it's a cool one to kind of bellwether to kind of go bar to bar from.
Yeah, for sure. Almost like a tuning fork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
What's the vibration of that
old
particular
fashions were
place?
like that and for a long time. I think daiquiris are like that now to a lot of bars.
Yep.
But Mai Tais will tell you a lot what you want to know about a bar or
Right.
a bartender.
Cool. We're debuting a new lightning round question here
Yeah.
this week. If you were a cocktail ingredient or tool, so it can be the software or the hardware used to make it, what would you be and why?
So I had a quick moment to think about this, but my go-to answer right now would be probably a bar spoon. So the bar spoon is one of those ingredients you're just kind of, it is a little bit, how you use it is important, and it kind of like, it's fun to, it stirs all the cocktails and makes it all blend together. And I think like what I like about bartending is you're working with a lot of different elements and working with guests, you're working with like crowd control, you're working with maybe something, the POS is not working, and all of a sudden you've got to make that all work together. It's a slow like stir and you're mixing all the ingredients and hopefully coming out with a different a great cocktail. So like I said, not to sound too cheesy, but I would think on when I have fun behind the bar and I'm doing my job well, everything's coming out okay.
Yeah, bar spoon. That's a great answer. I love bar spoons, and you're right. The bar spoon is ultimately responsible for creating that fusion, whether that's atmosphere or flavor. So yeah, great answer. If you could have a cocktail with anybody in the world, past or present, who would you have a drink with? What would you drink? Where would you go? And what would you talk about?
So I would have to go out of the past here on this one. Mark Twain. So I love a little bit of, I do like history a lot, and I've always enjoyed Mark Twain's kind of writings. He wrote a book I kind of stumbled upon at one point called Innocents Abroad, and I read it. It was his travels throughout the Mediterranean and Middle East at the time, and it sounded like a person you could have a conversation with outside of time. His opinions, come and go, but it would be a fun experience to grab a drink with, sit down, have some whiskey in the South, have some whiskey on a riverboat, or maybe in the middle of his travels in the Middle East, and just be like, what's going on? Let's have fun, and it would be I think a really cool conversation.
Yeah, definitely a curious guy. I've recently come across a picture of him holding a model 1911 handgun, it's a very modern looking thing because that particular firearm actually set the aesthetic standards for the entire 20th century of what a handgun looks like.
Oh, really?
And so to see Mark Twain, who's this blast from the 19th century, right, where things are very much Wild West, shoot him up holding this gun that looks like something that maybe you'd see in a cop movie in the 80s was just a really crazy thing. And the thing I liked about that photo was just the dude was clearly curious and really didn't care too much about convention or what his image was, and I think he definitely has a bit of a Tiki streak in him.
Yeah, he also failed notoriously at business, man. I would probably ask him a little bit of advice, be like, hey, what not to do about owning a small bar. But he just seemed like one of those guys that you kind of could sit down and talk about a little bit of everything.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Mark Twain. Are there any books about Tiki or cocktails in general? I know we mentioned Liquid Intelligence earlier in the episode, but are there any books that were particularly influential or that you might recommend to people who are looking to learn more?
Oh, definitely. I think there are 3 books right now that that are always in the back of our bar that are helping us out. One is always going to be Beach Bomb Berries. He just came out with a 10-year anniversary re-release. That's definitely worth picking up. It gives you a much better in-depth history than I ever could. But if you sit at my bar, I'd be happy to kind of help you out. That book is going to be great about not only the history and kind of what we talked about, where the Mai Tai is Don the Beachcomber. The second book that kind of talks about Tiki is going right now and was a great resource guide for us when we opened was Smuggler's Cove. So Martin Kate was instrumental in creating Smuggler's Cove about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer at this point. It was one of the first that brought the Tiki resurgence back, and it is a great guide for the home bartender as well, because it'll tell you how to flash blend. Again, when we talked about crushing ice and such, that book is instrumental in helping us. The third book is going to be a rum guide. So it just came out about, I think, the last year or so by Tristan Stevenson. So when we talked about rum and building blocks, rum is a hard spirit to lock down for a lot of reasons, but he was able to visit island by island and distillery by distillery, and really that's, as far as we can tell, the best way to understand where your rum is coming from.
Yep.
So he has a very clear definition of what rum is and breaks down the different fermentation, distillation methods, and kind of helps you answer any questions you might have as a home bartender.
Right, and rum is one of those notoriously difficult spirits to even just put a definition on.
Yeah, to classify
sometimes.
it is kind of a exercise in futility, because people will argue with you to the end of time, and whatever. we have our opinions, but at the same point, like, if it tastes good, it tastes good, man.
Cool. Yeah, we'll definitely link to those in the show notes as well. Where Tiki is going, this is actually a question that I glossed over. Do you have any quick thoughts on where Tiki might be headed?
Well, to answer that question is kind of like you're looking at cocktail culture. I think this is the natural extension of where cocktail culture was. So it focused on pre-prohibition. It focused on those. Tiki is kind of the last vestige of that element. So, when of cocktails, and then it kind of had that dark period in the 70s and 80s. And as it's come back, I'm very interested to see where it's going. I think it's definitely the right time in 2018 to kind of take a step back and enjoy yourself from a vacation standpoint. But where it's going, I think a lot of drinks can stand with a little bit of levity. I think sometimes the cocktail culture, can be a little bit staid, a little bit like let's have this austere, it took itself too seriously for a long time. Mm-hmm. I think now it's coming out on the other side. It's like, okay, well, let's just have a drink. At any bar, you should have good cocktails. And I think Tiki can be part of that conversation.
Yeah, great. It kind of almost like a counterbalance to the stuffiness that has set in a little bit.
Right. And, you drink a drink out of a twisty straw, and like I said, you're going to naturally smile.
Right. Yeah. One way to say it would be the cocktail renaissance has a bit of a hangover and it needs a painkiller.
Well said.
All right, last question here before we tell folks how to get in touch with you and where you are. But if you could give any piece of advice to somebody who's just starting to learn about or experiment with Tiki, what would that advice be?
I always say this to anybody. You get this question a lot what drink should I start? How do I create a Tiki arsenal? So I say focus on one drink. Find the drink you like. Be able to make that one drink well. And then maybe you have the ingredients, again, for one Tiki cocktail. Maybe it's a Jungle Bird. You have your Campari, your pineapple juice, your simple syrup. And all of a sudden you're like, well, I want to use that ingredient, and I'll get one more drink. And then you're adding in one more syrup. And then all of a sudden you can make two drinks. And then once you've dialed those in, you focus on a third drink. And then you kind of start seeing that you can make 4 or 5 drinks. So start slowly, focus on 1 or 2 things, and then kind of expand naturally. Let it happen. Maybe throw a party, make a punch bowl, and make a couple Tiki drinks on the side, and then expand slowly.
Sure. Great. That's great advice. How can people get in touch if they have any questions about Tiki or they want to get into Archipelago and have some awesome drinks?
So we always on the Instagram. Follow us. Again, we like taking pictures of our drinks. So you can follow us at Archipelago Bar DC. That's also the name. You can email us if you have any questions about stuff. info@archipelagobardc.com. Those are the easiest ways to get on us. Of course, we got a Facebook page. Don't recommend Facebook Messenger. I get every once in a while I get my wires crossed on that one. But stop in. One of us is always here. Me and the other guys are going to be here for the foreseeable future. Always behind the bar, making drinks, and hopefully, giving you some fun vibes.
Nice. Ben, thanks so much for taking the time, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, there's two big things you can do for us here at Modern Bar Cart. One would be to tell your friends and family if you think they'd enjoy listening to us talk about cocktails. And if they don't download podcasts, they can always stream our episodes on their desktop directly from the show notes page at modernbarcart.com. The other thing you can do to help would be to head on over to iTunes or wherever you download your podcasts and leave us a review. 5 stars are great, but we're more interested in your feedback. And the beauty is, the more reviews we have, the easier it will be for other folks out there to learn about our show. We're trying to start a cocktail revolution here, and by spreading the word, you're helping us fight the good fight. You can always reach us by emailing podcast@modernbarcart.com if you're looking for cocktail or bartending advice, or if you're a pro who would like to pull up a mic and be interviewed for all to hear. Also, definitely follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Modern Bar Cart for cocktail porn, recipes, and entertaining tips. And keep an eye out for new product releases and special offers, which are happening all the time. We love our listeners, and we really enjoy giving you exclusive discounts and sneak peeks at our latest and greatest cocktail projects. This episode may be over, but for you, the mixological fun and adventures are just beginning, so remember, folks, drink responsibly and experiment boldly. This episode was made possible with editing and production assistance by Samantha Reed, amazing Tiki insights by Ben Wiley, annoying background noise from those construction guys on U Street, and a little interview magic by yours truly. This has been a Modern Bar Cart production, copyright 2018.